Welcome to the Microgreens Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Jonah Krochmalnik. Together, we'll explore the art of turning tiny seeds into a thriving microgreens empire, sharing insights, coveted secrets, and strategic wisdom from building one of Canada's largest microgreens farms. Stay tuned for thought-provoking conversations with leading figures in the world of microgreens. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. On today's episode, we have Stijn, Baan from Koppert Cress in the Netherlands. Koppert Cress is a leader and innovator in the microgreens industry with partner farms in Japan, Korea, Turkey, and the US. Their Dutch operation alone is 10 hectares, which is almost 25 acres of microgreens production in greenhouses. These are mind-blowing numbers. We'll be talking about the importance of collaboration amongst farms, working closely with Michelin star chefs, vertical integration of seed production and supply, including a potential new seed supplier for microgreens growers, and some really fascinating innovations Koppert Cress is working on in the microgreen space. Stay tuned as this episode is full of gold nuggets. Welcome to the podcast. I'm super excited to have you on, and I think this is going to be a really great episode, so I really look forward to it. So thanks again for coming on.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm actually a bit proud to be on this podcast.
Awesome. So I'd love to kind of hear your background and Koppert Cress's background and how you kind of got involved in microgreens and kind of the backstory of how the company came to be.
Yeah, so Koppert Cress has a history that goes back to 1987, 86 actually, my birth year, by Mr. Gerrit Koppert. He was always innovating. Something that runs in that Koppert family. And in 2002, my dad was asked to become the director of Koppert Cress. He has a long history before that, which I hope to elaborate on as well. But I was at the age of 14, 15 years old when during the summer holidays, I would join my dad to go to Koppert Cress and work a little bit, my first work experience. And I completely fell in love with Koppert Cress. Yeah.
Awesome. And did Koppert Cress start as a microgreen? Because were microgreens even a thing back then? So what was it? What was the company in the formation in the late 80s?
It was multiple things. It didn't start out as a cress growing company or a microgreen growing company. A lot of expertise with radish and machinery and equipment. So I don't know exactly when, but at a certain point, they developed the growing system for daikon cress, the radish cress we have. Because garden cress, or you might call it pepper cress, there's something traditional about that product here in Holland or in Europe. But this was something else, and the growing method was different as well. So the technology at the time developed is still the technology we're using today.
Interesting. Oh, that's cool. I never thought about garden cress. Sometimes called curly cress here. It's not that popular in North America, actually. I grew it a few times early on, and it just never really caught on. No one really wanted to buy it, so there wasn't really much of a market here. But it sounds like in the Netherlands, there's a pretty big market for it.
Well, and actually, it's a very underestimated microgreen. If you ask me, there's a lot of nutritional values in the curly cress, let's call it that, or the garden cress. But actually, you can find it in almost every retail store, in at least in the Netherlands and in Germany as well, and further down east, because it's very traditional. And actually, it's a bit old-fashioned. If I look at the sales for that product, that's the only product we do in retail. It's just a small part. It's really still a lot of traditional sales, and it didn't really catch on with chefs.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, and I'm glad you mentioned that. So just based on your customers, it sounds like most of them are chefs or distributors for restaurants. So I'd love to hear more about kind of the customer breakdown and as well as how large you guys are, because I think some listeners may not realize how substantial your operation really is. So I'd love to hear more about your customers and the size of the operation.
Well, I think that the customers, it started really the high-end gastronomy. So the business plan was literally, there's this nice guide we have, which shows all the Michelin stars, ranked from 3 to the 1. So that was the first target audience that my dad was hunting after when he stepped into Koppert Cress, knowing that they are very influential. And if you can convince a chef from the south of Spain that they want to have the Koppert Cress product, if you have a Michelin star, it makes it easier for you to get the products that you want. So everybody was very eager to supply these chefs. So creating a demand over the market towards the high-end end users, I think still to today is the best innovation we did within Koppert Cress. Whereas most of horticulture is just pushing products into the channels, we created the demand for the products that we're selling today. So it was really pioneering at the time. Size-wise, it's difficult to say how many end users we supply because we only have 100 customers, which are the Dutch traders. And the Dutch traders are well known for being able to export all across Europe and beyond. So I know what we sell to those first 100 customers, and wherever they sell it to is completely up to them. So I've been shocked many times already in the past that we found our products in the south of Italy when we were on a holiday, which makes us, of course, very proud, but also very curious on how these products actually ended up there and who's moving those products around. Now we know more about the market, so we have a better insight. But I'm confident that during Christmas week, we'll serve about 80,000 restaurants with our products.
Wow.
Which is crazy. Which is
That-
crazy. It was not the intent of Koppert Cress at all. I think we had a right attitude going into this market, but we never underestimated. We never thought we would reach so many end users. Yeah.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's just the farm in the Netherlands, right? You also have farms in other places as well. Are those owned by the like Koppert Cress,
No,
or are they kind of
we
franchised?
have several partnerships. So we have friends that grow Koppert Cress and market Koppert Cress. So we have a partner in Japan who is actually, I think, 3 times the size of Koppert Cress is in Holland, but they're mainly
Wow.
focused on consumer. And they have a lot of knowledge. So the partnership is always 2 ways. So we bring knowledge, we bring a brand, we bring our seeds as well. But then we get to play around in those markets and learn from that. And there's a lot that we've learned from the Japanese. Several years ago, we started in Korea, Seoul. The first partnership was in New York, Long Island, where I actually I lived there for a year as well. I still have a big heart for that. So I know a little bit about the US market, but this was 10 years ago, I guess I lived there. Of course, still very connected, but and I saw also the difference between microgreens and cress in Europe, the way it's produced over there, the way the market is, and the way it is in Holland. And just to drop them, because I'm very proud to have them as partners. We have a partnership in Turkey as well.
Oh, cool.
And we're starting now something in Brazil. So it's exciting to see how cress are being perceived in all these different cultures. And I went to all the places in the world where we had big ambitions, but never really got things started off the ground, as you do with when you're hunting for partners.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's crazy to see how much the market has changed. I was in Peru in April, and I went to some higher end restaurants there, and almost every restaurant we went to it was for Westerners. It wasn't for locals, but they all had microgreens, and they all had beautiful microgreens. And I wouldn't think in my mind a place like Peru would have a market for microgreens in a country like that, but they did. And so it's really starting to spread worldwide now, where it really started when I started 10 years ago, and it was much more niche. It was starting to become like a retail product that people would actually consume, not just on the food service side, but it's really exploded in this last decade. And I'm excited to see that continue, because there's so many health benefits, and so much variety. As I'm excited to get into that with you, because I think you guys not just leading on the front of creating the market for microgreens or cress, but also the amount of variety and innovation you guys are doing, I think is really, really cool. So maybe we could just touch on that and go from there and see a little more about the variety you grow, how like the growing process. I'm guessing there's a lot of automation in that as well, given how large you guys are. So just generally production in general, how you guys grow, what varieties you're growing, and some of the innovations you guys are doing in the space.
Oh, big questions though.
Yeah.
No, then going back to the origin of the company was Gerrit actually has a brother who's very technical. So when we stepped into Koppert Cress, there was already the growing method and also the machinery there. Of course, this got bigger and more automated, but the basis was still the same. So we grow on cellulose, which is a paper pulp. We get big blocks in there, like industrial sized blocks, which we then mix with the water and the fertilized water if needed. And we pour that into the trays we have. And the trays are already the punnets in which we sell the products. And we only produce living microgreens. I think that's also a bit different than what you see a lot in the US. Our partner in the US still grows living as well as cut microgreens, but the living is really what makes it unique, also from a shelf life point of view and nutritional value. We grow them on tables. Of course, in the beginning, we moved these tables around, and we took the trays from the machinery on the table. All of that is now automated, but the basis is still the same. Tables go into the greenhouse. There's a lot of innovation in our greenhouse. I think the biggest part of our greenhouse is climate neutral, so we don't use any fossil fuel anymore.
Wow.
And we're hoping to be all off fossil fuel by 2025. We store the products cold when they're ready for harvest. They need to cool down before we bring them into the supply chain. We got a big order picking team because we have, I think, about 70 different products now, but of course, all in different types of packaging. So you can multiply that by 3. And we deliver most of the time within a half hour or hour. So we get the orders in early in the morning, and then the team starts gathering the orders. And the packing also starts at that time. So we keep minimal inventory. And then, we supply on a daily basis all our customers. And you have to know the Westland to understand it, but the Westland is really a densely horticulture population where 80% of all the Dutch export traders in produce are. So we have the luxury that our trucks, they only drive half hour max from our facility.
Wow.
Half of our customers come and pick up. So logistically, we are very blessed to be in this region. Well, it's not a coincidence that this business is in the region now.
Yeah. So how far is the facility from Amsterdam? Like
An hour.
Okay.
An hour. So yeah.
Okay.
That's a small country, yeah.
Yeah. I still haven't been. I've always wanted to go just to see the innovation in agriculture. It's one of the places that I look forward to visiting in the next few years. But I've always been amazed at the innovation in just in general in agriculture in the Dutch society. It seems like it's very rooted in being self-sufficient in food production, and it's crazy because it's more north than where I am in Canada, and you guys are producing so much more food, which is just very, very impressive, especially given the climate during the winter months.
Well, it's funny because the Dutch, we are the number 2 food exporter in the world, next to the US.
Oh, interesting.
Which is quite silly because we're such a small country, but it mainly has to do with our harbors. So I don't take that much pride in that statistic because we are actually the biggest exporter of oranges. Well, you don't have to visit Holland to know that we don't grow any oranges ourselves. So because a lot of produce comes in through our harbors, and we export them as well. But what I do take a lot of pride in that, and when it comes to horticulture, we are the leaders of that movement. There's so much knowledge here. We have all our partners, like technical suppliers. They're all in this region. So the innovation in this region is they call it like the Silicon Valley of horticulture is what you find here in Westland.
Yeah. No, I totally understand that, and like it's just interesting how the climate is not the most conducive for year-round production, yet you guys have found a way to make that work. Because in our climate, even for microgreens, the reason I went indoors in a vertical facility was because the consistency of the product is without having a lot of technology in place, often very expensive technology, it'd be very difficult to replicate a year-round consistent environment. So just going vertical just made sense to me, because then you can just rent a warehouse space, or even greenhouse space in I'm in Toronto, which is a pretty big city. It's almost impossible to find. You have to go at least 3-4 hours away to get relatively inexpensive greenhouse space. So it just wasn't practical. But you just back to production, you start with growing it under lights, or is it start in a greenhouse when they're in
We
germination?
grow them on tables. We put them underneath the covers to keep them in the dark, and then determining, of course, which variety is. We open up the covers. We don't move the tables that much. We'll park them until they're finished, and then, of course, we put the lights. If needed, we put the lights on. There's some days during the year where we have enough light here in Holland, but now, of course, now winter time is coming. We do have the lights on.
Yeah. And how large is the greenhouse in production space, or just the size of the greenhouse that you guys are growing? I'm guessing there's multiple ones at this point.
Yeah, we have. They're all in on walking distance now. I think in total we have about 10 hectares, not acres but hectares. But then it's also good to know that we grow edible leaves, edible flowers, all the other varieties as well. So I think it's about 50-50 when it comes to space.
Yeah. In terms of like cress, microgreens, and edible flowers, baby leaves.
Space wise, yeah.
Wow. Okay. So wow, that's great. So the have you noticed a big change in the edible flowers market? Because the more farms I've talked to, the more I realize there's more and more farms are growing edible flowers. It seems to be the next big move in this kind of niche of high end food service products. Have you noticed a big shift in the demand for edible flowers over the last few years?
Yeah, I do think there's a big shift in it. We've started already a long time ago with the edible flowers as well. We actually started with that in New York. It was a bigger demand in the US for edible flowers at that time than there was in Holland. Now I think that the Europe kind of catched on already, or maybe they were selling it already, but we were not in that market. But I do believe that people that grow microgreens have a tendency to go to fast-growing crops or fast-growing cycles, and pansies, for example, is a crop that will give you new flowers every day. So there's a similarity in that sense. I think growing specialties is more complicated than it is with growing the microgreens. Or complicated. It's a different ballgame. Let's call it like that. But it's different than. We have a lot of people here growing pansies, but that's just for ornamental sales. And then you grow the plant completely different than you would if you just wanted to give flowers. So there's a lot to learn from both sides, I think, in that case. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I always think of microgreens as like there can be a lot of complexity to them, especially the more varieties you grow, which I'm excited to get into that next. But when you consider like the life cycle of a microgreen, it's somewhere between 7 and 28 days, generally closer to that 7 to 14 day mark is where most of them are grown commercially. So you think about that, and once you have a recipe, you can just kind of repeat that and then you can know what the yield is. But with flowers, you have to wait till the flower opens. It's got to be at the right stage of open. If it's too late, then the shelf life is not going to be good. I'm guessing those have to be hand harvested. I don't know if that's the case, but that would be. I'm hoping at one point that would be automated, but that's a pretty, like, compared to automating, having a harvester to cut microgreens, having some sort of harvesting machine to pick edible flowers would take a lot more precision. So it's a lot harder of a growing process, which is why I think less people have gone into it. But what I've seen is it seems that there's more and more demand for those products, at least in North America, and it sounds like in Europe as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So in terms of variety, you said you grow 70 different varieties, which is just mind blowing to think about, because most farms, don't even grow. Even market gardens don't even grow 70 varieties of vegetables, let alone 70 varieties of microgreens. So that's very impressive how much variety.
To clarify, I think 35 of them are microgreens, and the other 25, 30 are the edible leaves, edible flowers variety. So
Got
they're
it.
not
Got it.
all, yeah.
Okay. But even still, that's still an insane amount of variety. So, and also I've been on your website and there's a lot of unique varieties that you grow that I've just never seen anywhere. So I'd love to delve in like how you guys develop these products. Do you use the same technique of going to these Michelin star chefs, seeing what they want, create the demand through that route? Is that still the process? And what are some of these unique varieties that that you are growing?
Yeah. It's difficult for me to say what is unique, but if I look at I have to go a little bit back in time. So before Rob started at Koppert Cress, he was working for a seed company, and he was doing a lot of the exports. So he was always in countries like Japan, Korea, India. He spent a lot of time abroad, and he has three big passions. One, of course, was seeds, because that was the business. Two was traveling, and number three was cooking. And those three things are very crucial still to what makes Koppert Cress today. So he came back with products which were commodities in Japan. You would find them in every market. There was not something special, like shiso leaves, the perilla. The Japanese, they eat these big leaves. Every time they have raw fish, they eat these leaves because they're actually, it's like reverse medicine. Where we in our Western society, if we want to have medicines in our cabinets, where the Japanese ignore, because you cannot always guarantee the quality of fish. So therefore, when you eat shiso leaves with that, the perilla leaves, that might help you calm down your stomach in case the food was bad. So it's like preventing instead of treating it. And actually, the Japanese have so much inspiration because a lot of the edible flowers were used on raw fish. Because if you would see raw fish and it would be out at the cooler for several hours, you would not be able to see it from the fish. But if a leaf was on that fish and the leaf was wilting, then you would know not to touch that fish.
Wow.
So there's a lot of communication and a lot of, it's still fascinating to me, is the functional food aspect that the Japanese have, which we lack so much in our Western society. I can speak for Europe and the States as well.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah,
That's fascinating. That is fascinating.
Yeah, well, we love telling stories at Koppert Cress because stories is what they stay in our mind. So that's kind of also how I grew up. So every product we have has some sort of story. So when you talk about, we call it Avila cress, or you would call it pea shoots. The pea shoots or the snow peas, I think snow peas is also a common name, right?
Yeah.
These were the first products that would grow out of the snow in Korea. So when they have a harsh winter, the first thing they were able to eat was these snow peas that would come out of the snow, because it's one of the seeds that can actually germinate when it's very cold. So
Wow.
the cultural relevance of snow peas is so amazing for people that have traveled, that have seen that, to understand that and to bring that back to our greenhouse and then grow these varieties as a cress. So that's why what is unique, some things are unique, are very common in other countries. So of course there's a few products that we take a lot of pride in, but we didn't invent anything. We took plants out of nature and we tried to cultivate them in the size which fits as a microgreen or cress. We have some microgreens which they actually want to be a tree. They're 12-meter high trees, but we decided to sell them just as small microgreens.
Interesting. Okay, what variety is that, if you don't mind me asking?
So we have the Tahun. I actually have a small box next to me here. You probably have a different name for this one, or I'm showing you something that you haven't seen before.
Well, it's hard to see that the quality is a little bit. Oh, is that purslane?
No.
Yeah, I don't know what that is. I don't think I've seen that.
That already makes me very proud, of course, to have something that you, as the microgreen consultant, hasn't seen yet. No, it's a Tahun, and it's actually a very high flavorful, nutty. This wants to be a 12-meter high tree. It grows in the Himalayas, and it's actually one of the few products that we have to. We get the seeds from the trees, Normally we get the seeds at a very young age, at the age of 1 or 2, but they actually come from a tree. And has a very strong nutty flavor. It goes very well with the weather we're having today. So I think that's one of the unique products we have. You can also grow it a little bit bigger, than you get the bigger leaves that sometimes they would use for bouillons or soups. But I think that's one of the unique ones we have.
Interesting. How fat? Like usually trees take at least, I don't know, in my North American climate, like a tree need like a winterized period or stratification to germinate. So how does that work with that variety? Does it need some sort of cold temperature to germinate, or is it you just plant it and it's like just like a broccoli, it'll just germinate in a few days?
Not like a broccoli. Definitely needs longer underneath the cloth, so to say. It's and it has a dormant time where the seeds need to be inactive for a while. Don't hold me up
Okay.
to the specifics, but it's
Yeah,
not
yeah,
something you can harvest and sow the next week.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I think the seeds fall down, winter comes over it, so that's what we kind of replicate when we store the seeds, and after that they are you can start sowing with them.
Got it. When you showed me that, one thing I was just thinking of, I don't know if anyone's ever done this or if it's even realistic or possible, but moringa is a really popular tree that is grown in the tropics for the leaves. I've actually never had fresh moringa leaves. I've only had
Yeah.
dried, but I wonder if that would work well as a microgreen because it's kind of like a very unique. At least the mature leaves are very unique, and I believe it's a legume, so it should be relatively fast growing.
We tried it, but we were not able to make it tasty. Let's call it that.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a lot of health benefits claimed to the product, to the tree. So then we're always interested in growing that. But this one we were not able to make tasty at it, because that's the challenge, to have trees which are which we know from mature, they're only relevant when they're mature.
Yeah.
They're hard, it's difficult to grow them into cress. So every time, that's also why we have some of these specialties, because we try to grow something in a small variety, so we can call it a microgreen and it can fit in our existing system. But then reality hits in, and then it's not tasty when it's young, so you have to grow it and sell the flowers with the leaves at a mature age. Or no, we
Yeah,
cannot
for
control
sure.
everything that nature's given us.
Yeah, yeah. There's that just it just opened up a whole new window or door to me. I'm just thinking about all the different tree species that could be edible and could be grown as a microgreen. Now, of course, I think most trees are going to be a lot slower to germinate because they're not
Yeah.
necessarily like an annual. Their game is the long game, not 1 year survival. So it's a whole different beast there. But I think it's like out of the box thinking on the opportunity with microgreens and cress to grow varieties like that. So I'm guessing you guys must have a team that's kind of always experimenting, always trying to find new things to potentially grow.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have also a commercial team that travel quite a lot. So I think every country in Europe, or at least most countries in Europe, we are represented. So they also talk to a lot to chefs, of course. So we get inspiration from all these different angles, and our partners, of course. Um, I think we have tried most of the obvious things, but the challenge is to always still look for that one thing which is unique.
Yeah.
Um, that's still the goal, of course. There's some varieties that I would just love to add to our current product portfolio, because it will help chefs out. But we're always looking for new innovations, things which are something that people did not expect from us, for example.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, me personally, that sounds like a dream job. Is like travel, travel Europe or travel the world and try to find new, unique things that maybe are more common in some of these countries and bring them back and popularize them. I think that sounds like a very rewarding and very fun job. It's like being like a explorer in a new world sort of thing, and it sounds
Yeah.
very very fun.
We're very
As
conscious that the world of edible plants is bigger than any of us can imagine. So yeah, there's still a lot of work to be done to finding out these plants and finding a way to grow them properly. No, I'm right with you. That will be a dream job. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So in terms of like so you have the 35 varieties of microgreens or cress, and then you have about the same in flowers and baby green. So out of those two kind of categories, which ones would be the most popular or ones that you guys sell the most volume of?
Yeah, so Cress is definitely the biggest variety we have. It's what we started with. There's some specialties coming up now, also in popularity. But there's just the legacy of these cresses are still very, very big. So um, we do see a big rise in demand for, we call it the salad pea, or the snow pea, or the pea shoots, or fries you would call it. I think that's been more popular in the US than it was in Europe. We started with it 10 years ago now, and
Oh,
it's
wow.
been growing ever since. Of course, we had the Avila, but never that bigger variety, which we see now that a lot of restaurants, they are struggling with labor in the kitchen. There's not enough staff. So this is one of the only products that we sell as a cut. Specialties are all cut, but it's a crest that, so it's convenience for restaurants to use as well. But of course, with this, we also want to do something special, which was not there in the market. So we have this crazy variety, our Celepi variety, which is a special breed of genetics that we have the rights to,
Wow.
or that we developed over time ourselves. And that's also one of the reasons why we only sell it cut, because we don't want the seeds to go out in the world. We are very proud of that variety because it's really decorative, has a really nice flavor. Um, so we hope it stands out above all the other varieties that we have.
That's cool. Yeah, that's one thing. While I had while I owned Living Earth Farm the last decade, I didn't really have much time to do that kind of crop development. But there was a few seeds that I saved. I had pea shoot seeds that had variegation on them,
Mm.
and I planted them. I took them out. I planted them and saved the seeds from that. So I still haven't planted them, but I'm hoping to create a new variety of pea shoots that's variegated for microgreens production at some point. This is like a very long-term project. I got way too many things on the go. But I think that would be really cool because it looks almost like it was like white. There was one that was white and green, and then one that was yellow and green. And the
Wow.
white and green was really beautiful on the leaves. So and it seemed to go pretty far until flowering the variegation. So I'm hoping I can stabilize it and have a new variety. That's one thing when you grow so many microgreens, you eventually find the 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 seeds that have some sort of genetic
Yeah,
difference.
absolutely. Yeah.
So, when you're growing millions of seeds every week, you're bound to come by some sort of genetic change. And then if you can save them, if you can catch them in time and save them, then you potentially have new varieties or of just plants in general. But my goal obviously was to create a really beautiful looking microgreen. So I hope that'll come true. But that's cool that you guys have done the breeding as
Make it a
well.
priority. Make it a priority because you'll do everybody a favor.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I thought I have the seeds literally in my kitchen for the last year. I think this is the motivation to. I pretty much what I've wanted to do was create the perfect growing environment and make sure I'm there to take care of them. And so I've been waiting for the right time to plant them because they're so precious. There's I think I have like 5 or 6 seeds total, so I don't have a lot. But yeah, I just want to make sure it has the right environment, the right soil, everything.
So it's what we did with this reddish. It's a red variety. You see it more common now as well, but this
Yeah,
one
yeah.
is bright red with almost no green in it. So these are projects that we're also very keen on to find out the make sure the varieties are really red. So we have a company called Songo Seeds who develop the seeds, that produce the seeds for us. Of course, we have a long history when it comes to seed production. So we do more than 80% of all seed production by ourselves. So we are right there at the source when we see the field, when we see the crops that will grow the seeds. So we're always in the lookout for rare varieties that come out of that. Yeah.
Yeah, that looked really good. Most of the red radish I've seen, it's got, in my opinion, too much green to be considered like a pure red variety. Um, but that looked like about the best I've ever seen in terms of having not much green. So yeah, maybe if you want to touch on a little more about the seed company you guys have. I didn't realize that it was 80% of the seeds that you grow are provided by your own company, which is pretty smart vertical integration to ensure quality control. So I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, so it's Koppert Cress is a family-run company. I'm one side of the family, but we also have another side of the family they also come from the same seed company that my dad used to work for. So there's a lot of history when it comes to seed production and the multiplication of seeds, multiplying seeds. So there's a lot of knowledge that we have that we use to grow our own seeds. And of course, it's our lifeline. If we don't have seeds, we don't have any product. So we already have, for many, many years, we started with growing our own seeds for Koppert Cress. And it was kind of within the organization. And then at a certain point, the organization got bigger and the seed production was not something that you could do on the side. As you go with growing companies, sometimes you have to say, okay, let's make it, we'll separate it and we'll make sure it's going to be, gets all the focus it needs and deserves. So that company is now active for 5-6 years maybe. Before that, we were also selling the seeds already to our partners. But it's a company that also sells seeds to other growers. It's still quite new. It's developing itself, but I don't think it's even has a website yet. But it's getting there, because there's also very important. Once we had an E. coli scare in Germany, where, quite ignorant, they blamed it on sprouts. Years later, they figured out it was not sprouts at all, it was something in the water. But you can imagine if something happens and somebody actually died, that was not good for the sprouting business. But because we are such a rare product, they don't know how to categorize us. So just to be sure, they said sprouts and cresses, which was devastating for us. Which with cress, you never have that risk that sprouts would have, because these sprouts, they are grown in big drums. They have cross-contamination. If there's one thing wrong with a seed, then it will be in that small cup and it will not be able to go to be such of a high risk. But in that time, there's no arguing. It was just the conception at the time. So we find it very important that whoever's growing microgreens is using clean seeds. All the seeds that we produce and we sell are of the highest quality when it comes to, you should be able to eat the seeds. So there can be no E. coli, salmonella, all those things. They're heavily tested. We know the farmers that grow the seeds for us. So we do everything within our own control if possible, just to make sure that you get clean seeds. Because that's essential. If somebody else messes up, let's so to say, it doesn't follow protocol, or just gets somebody sick from microgreens, it's going to damage the entire microgreen branch sector. So I'm always very keen on that. During my time in the US, I was also part of the International Sprout Growers Association, and I saw the craziness around sprouts. Should not be eaten by elderly or by pregnant people, or it was almost a risk to eat these products. There was such Meanwhile, these things are healthy because they have so much microbiology on them. And yes, there's a few that you don't want that will make you sick, but sprouts have so much health benefits, and they're put in the corner as risky, not for elderly or pregnant people, or which I probably should not say that people should eat that at all. I'm not an expert or live in the US, but I think it's a lot of misinformation on that. So therefore, we also sell seeds because we want to make sure that everybody who wants to get started with microgreens can get clean seeds, quality seeds, get some support, some guidance as well when they start.
For sure. I've personally seen some very interesting outbreaks that were misreported in the news, that were just very interesting to see it happen live, being in the industry. But the sprout industry is kind of just like, not microgreens, the sprout specifically. It's crazy. When I started 10 years ago, sprouts were as common as microgreens, and now, like, they're not gone. They're still there, but I never see, when I go to my local health food store, I almost never see anyone buying them. They take up such a small area of the shelf space now. It's crazy to see how much that's changed. There is definitely a ton of health benefits. I think microgreens are a better bang for buck health wise. But there is more risk with sprouts because they're grown in that moist environment and you're eating the roots. But for the first few years I sold sprouts along with microgreens, and then the more these outbreaks that happen, I was like, I don't think this is worth necessarily the risk, especially that if it taints your company and or the industry, it's going to be overall not a great thing for anyone. But it's also unfortunate that they categorize, at least in North America, I don't know if it's the same over there, they categorize sprouts and microgreens in the same category for like regulations, for procedures. And it's like, they're not the same thing. It's like a microgreen is much closer to a baby salad green than it is to a sprout in terms of production. Yeah. But they're just, it's whoever's making these regulations is not informed well enough. Is it the same thing there? Are they kind of categorized as the same?
Sometimes they are. I think sprouts now more determine what is a sprout, and it's more uncommon to figure out what is a microgreen or a cress. I do say that growing sprouts in Europe is heavily regulated, and have a lot of these companies are legit. There's no amateurism. There's no room for amateurism when it comes to sprouting. So we don't have that risk that at least the tenseness around the sprouts that you have in the US. Which I know a little bit from experience from many years ago, but still, no, we and Europe is of course many different countries altogether. So all these countries have their own different view and regulation when it comes to it. So sometimes we're a herb, sometimes we're a sprout, sometimes we're a salad. It's and most of the time we don't really care what they categorize it as long as we can bring the products into the market. But there's sometimes that it gets frustrating to figure out how they want to classify you, because there's no sense in informing them.
Yeah,
partly.
For sure. That's hopefully it'll be more consistency. But yeah, I didn't even think about that. In Europe, every country is going to have, even though they're in the EU, they're going to have certain things that are regulated separately than EU regulations. But if people want to buy seeds because there's a lot of commercial growers that listen to this podcast, are they able to right now buy seeds from your seed company, or is it still kind of in the works in that process?
No, it's definitely there. So I would reach out to Koppert Cress in general, and we can direct people to the right contact person, because I don't want to call out the website now if I don't know the exact website it's going to be.
For sure.
But you should invite my colleague on your podcast, because he can tell so much about seed production of seeds for microgreens, because that's a whole different ballgame. I mean, there's so much things you can do in the growing cycle, and actually so much nutritional values are determined by the mother plant, not the growing of what we as growers do. The nutritional values of these young microgreens are determined in the field of the mother plant, how they are raised, and less by how we grow them within these 7 days or 14 days. That's very insignificant when it comes to nutritional values. And that's a book that we're just opening and we're learning more and more about every year. But it's not things you should buy from the shelf, in my opinion. There's a lot of things that are important to know, where the seeds come from, how far they traveled, where they come, what the origin is, for example.
Yeah.
But that's enough promotion about a seed company. But and the nice thing is what they offer. Sorry, I continue with the promotion. What they offer is a lot of knowledge. We made so many mistakes already ourselves. We've been in this game for a while. You know that growing microgreens is it has a very steep learning curve. So it's really interesting to find people who do it from passion, and from passion move into an actual business. And that's where I sometimes see people that get a bit lost. Oh, this is going beyond my control. I was able to do this by myself, and now all of a sudden I need more people to help me out. And that's a phase which is interesting to jump into, I think.
Yeah. I definitely went through that phase, and the Living Earth Farm was my first business. I kind of did it right out of school, didn't have much experience, and I had to learn the hard way I tried to automate as much as I can, but when it came to eventually hiring staff, I had to learn that whole process of people managing, and it's tough. It was probably the toughest part of the business, probably because I was so passionate about the growing side of things, and even the selling side of things. Like, that came more naturally to me. But once a business turns from you doing everything yourself to it's too big, I can't do everything myself, it's a whole different beast of a business. It'd be helpful for people to recognize it as almost two different businesses at that point, because they are so dramatically different that it's almost like running a completely different business when you eventually make that switch or transition.
Well, and people are always very eager to jump into a new business or a startup or to get that energy vibe, but then tend to forget that these plants, they grow 7 days a week.
Yeah.
So it's not something. It's that you go from continuously being always aware of the growing cycle, and it's not a 9 to 5 process that you have. So yeah, I understand that struggle. Yeah.
Yeah, I had to I had to make a big sacrifice early on. I didn't take a day off for 4.5 years. When I did everything myself, and that was taught me patience, but also taught me that there's other ways to do it than do everything yourself. And obviously with Microgreens Consulting, the learning curve is much faster because I've already done kind of this process once, so it's a lot easier to learn the second time than the first time.
But it's also sometimes we're jealous of that smaller scale, because it's easy to look at a company of a big size and, oh, that's great, but the simplicity you have when it's just a small company, and the way it's easy to connect with, if you have a team, to connect with the team, because it's very dynamic and energetic at a time. Your customers still, so there's a certain value in that phase as well. And I always say it's typical Dutch for us to want to be bigger and to sell more and to grow as a company. Whereas there's value in just being a steady supplier and taking care of your local restaurants with by yourself or just a small team. I think that will be a dream job as well, because you get to do everything yourself. There's some romance in that as well for me.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And most, at least in North America, most of the microgreens industry is mostly small growers because it's so easy to start. A lot of growers will start in their home, get a rack, start growing microgreens, make a few $1,000s a month sort of thing, and then expand it from there. So it's a really easy business to start. And if someone is interested in farming, there's not much else you can do growing food and selling food that has that ability where you don't need a ton of capital. You can start it in your house. You don't have to rent a facility or go buy a farm or rent land. So it's very accessible, which is why I think it's very transformative for people like that. I wouldn't have been able to start if I didn't start in microgreens, because they're like, I started growing outdoor crops at a farm that was kind of co-op, but it was you pretty much had a small piece of land, you can share equipment, that sort of thing. And then I think I made $5,000 my first summer, and I worked my ass off. Like, I worked really hard, and I barely made anything. It's like, even back then, that didn't even pay for food, So like, food you eat didn't even pay for that. So it's really tough to be an outdoor farmer, and I think technology plays a really big role in that, in allowing that to happen. But the challenge is, if you don't have capital, then you can't afford all of the technology that you necessarily need, right? So it's kind of like a catch-22 there. So microgreens allow you to spend, $1,000, $2,000 on equipment, start growing them, and then scale from there, reinvest. So it's a very unique business proposition in the farming space.
Yeah. No, most people in agriculture, they roll into the business because they have family. They come from a family company or family that has horticulture business, because who finished their education and buys a greenhouse to start to grow something? The barrier to step in is actually too high. It's nice and low for microgreens, but it's too high to do something else.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. It's actually, I think, a very big problem that a lot of that people that aren't in the industry don't realize. I believe the average age of farmers, don't quote me on this, is somewhere around 62 or 63 in the US or Canada. And someone's got to replace them, and the next generation doesn't want to be a field farmer driving a tractor around, because it's like, everyone wants to be a YouTuber. Like, all the kids want to be a TikTok sensation. Like, no one wants to be a farmer. And it's really important that that's cultivated.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah. Or be a basketball player, which I think has always been the case. I think the YouTuber is the new like TV star, but it needs to be more accessible to allow people to get into farming. And I think right now it's very difficult. There's not many programs, at least in Canada, that really heavily support people starting farms. So I think more of that is needed, more programs, and I think the biggest thing, I think the biggest impact would be to have more like little tiny grow setups in schools and get people excited about growing plants and horticultural in schools, because that's where um, the next generation is built in those, or grows up in those
Absolutely.
schools. So if you teach them in that point that, hey, this is vertical farming or greenhouse farming is actually a viable career, then more people want to get into it, and we'll have less potential issues with food supply as the baby boomer generation starts retiring in
We actually do
agriculture.
quite a lot of work in trying to get children to be part of the education, the growing part of it. So the small gardens, we try to support that in the Netherlands as well. My dad's a big enforcer on that. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's an interesting movement in China. I saw this documentary about Qingdao, I think it's called, where they moved a lot of houses away to start horticulture. So you have all these Chinese traditional greenhouses,
Interesting.
and because it's so big, they had to move people around away, and they're all now living in these apartment flats close to. And they were kind of romancing the business to get up early, do your growing, your harvesting, and then being done with work at 3 o'clock. And you work together with your wife or with your partner, and then you would promote your own products. So a lot of the growers, and they have less than an hectare, they would promote their own products, and the consumers from their side were able to look at the products and swipe to whatever they like. So you see all sort of that gap between because a lot of the big growers here, they don't do their own promotion, they have somebody else doing it, but these small growers were doing their own promotion, and I like that as well. I follow a lot of accounts on Instagram when it comes to microgreens. They're really promoting themselves, and
Yeah.
that's also how origin of horticulture was. You would grow your own product, but you would have a name, so you would stand behind your product, literally and figuratively. So this is the product I
Yeah.
put my name on. If I go to church on Sunday and my product's not good, someone's going to tell me. So that's very important, and because the Dutch agriculture. Let me talk only about the Dutch. We had the auction, we had other companies selling the produce. We kind of got disconnected with our end user. So we have tomato growers who are the best efficient growers of tomatoes, but they have zero connection with their end user. Their products are not being sold on their own brand. There are private labels for retailers, and it's absolutely fine. I don't have any judgment on that. But what I love about microgreen growing is that you have that connection with your end user. And even for us doing things at a bigger scale, we still talk to chefs. We have a beautiful kitchen here at Koppert Cress where we invite chefs to come over. The team we have, they talk to chefs. The people that do the promotion of Koppert Cress are chefs. So they have a history of being in kitchens. So when they talk to chef, they have a different type of connection than I would as a marketeer or a grower I would have with a chef. I love talking to chefs, but within 5 minutes, I'll make a fool out of myself. And these chefs, they have this different connection. I've said one of our chefs, I've seen him a whole afternoon with a Japanese chef. They were not able to understand each other because they both didn't speak, or one of them didn't speak English. But they still have a connection when they're in the kitchen about flavors, about food pairing, about where the products come from. So that's important to always have that connection with the end user. And if you get bigger, that's for me one of the most important things to make sure you keep that connection with the end users, because they
Mm.
will give you feedback which is far more relevant than the buyer of your product. Because the buyers are going to be focused about price, availability, and all those things, whereas the end user is going to give you feedback on flavor.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, because I feel that I kind of ran into that issue where obviously when I started, I was really small. So I was working directly with restaurants and customers directly. And then as I scaled, I started working more and more with distributors. And I kind of lost that connection because I was so focused on production, building the team, expanding, that I didn't really go out and find who the end users are. Like I didn't even at certain points I didn't even know through distributors who was carrying the products, and then I go to a restaurant and be like, oh, this is where this is where the product's being sold, which is really cool. But at the same time, you're right, you lose that connection the larger you get, and it's really important for those that are listening that are scaling up their microgreens business to keep that connection with the end user, whether it's a chef, the retail store customer, direct to consumer customer, because they'll, like you said, they'll give you the best feedback on the product, and if you lose that, then you don't know if your product's actually changing, or you got a bad batch of seed and no one's even trying the product, and people aren't buying the product, which is, didn't happen to us in that scenario. But we had trouble getting cilantro seed at one point, and the flavor on this batch of seed we were getting was just not. There was something different with it, and that's one thing that which is why I was excited to talk to you about the seed company that you have, is because there is certain varieties I find that are hard to get that consistency. And it's like, as an example, sunflower is one, and there's some great companies. There's High Mowing Seeds and Johnny Seeds in the US that have pretty like very consistent quality sunflower. But as an example, in my experience, there's been a lot of inconsistency in certain varieties, and it might just be, I think it's just a difficulty in growing. But having another source of reliable seed, especially knowing that you guys use the seed that you're producing, is like an extra verification point that like this is going to be good quality seed.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So one thing we didn't touch on, which I just realized, is what your role is at Koppert Cress. So like that was usually something I asked right at the beginning, but I was just thinking there as I was mentioning that I didn't like kind of check in on what your role is on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis.
So at the moment, I'm a commercial director of Koppert Cress. So meaning I'm responsible for the commercial part, but I call it marketing. Marketing for us is the entirety of what we're doing. Also, the ambition to be a marketing-driven organization instead of production, which is the majority of companies in horticulture have that. So my day-to-day business, it's still a lot. It's a family company, so there's always a little bit extra that you get for free. Let's call it like that. No, I'm surrounded with great people. So we have our own communication department. We have 2 people doing all the graphic designing for Koppert Cress, the stories, the social media. So we have a lot of specialists. It's a luxury you have when you grow as a company. We have a sales team, like I said. People are active in all the different regions. So in the UK, Scandinavia, the DACH region, so that's Germany, Spain, Italy, and France. I actually just had them over last weekend, all the colleagues, which is great because we all have the same passion for food. So you can imagine we're having a great time. And product management. I think one of the most prestigious jobs that we have is to be product manager at Koppert Cress, to figure out what should be the next variety that we can grow. Because there's a long list of things we have in our backlog, as we call it. So how to make the right decisions on what to do. And we also have a very nice hospitality team. So we find it very important. We consider ourselves storytellers. That's why I jump on the opportunity to be on your podcast, of course, because I think it's important to tell the right stories when it comes to food. So we invite a lot of people to come over and visit Koppert Cress. We already had this experience, that's how we call it, this beautiful kitchen, since 2002. Because when we talked about our product over the phone, and in the business of microgreens, you can relate to that. Oh, I have this beautiful plant. It tastes like, and then people, they have to just take your word on it. It's not how it works. You need to let people taste the product.
Yes.
So we have plants that you should experience. We have this vegan oyster that you have to taste. You cannot sell it over the phone. So these are the things that you people come over, mostly chefs, but we do a lot of people that are not commercially motivated for us to host them over, because we think with stories we can make an impact. So my perfect week will be consisting of a lot of storytelling, sharing the word of Koppert Cress. We have one mission: it's let's change the way we look at food, and we can do it on so many levels. So we have a few themes that we find important. One is the health benefits between plants and humans, but also horticulture. Horticulture, we're doing a lot of amazing things in Holland, but still horticulture is a bit underestimated, in my opinion. And I can be very frustrated about it, but it is because of horticulture itself. We are too modest. We don't talk about what we're doing. We have so many beautiful technology, but we like to keep it for ourselves. So I think it's important that we talk more about it, become more relevant on a society level, not only in Holland, but for the bigger part. And youngsters, we have young people that never step foot in a greenhouse. That's a golden opportunity to get them excited about the world of plants. So on a regular week, we have every day there's 1 or 2 visiting groups that will
awesome.
tour. We'll show the greenhouse. We show the technology we use. We show them how to be climate positive if possible. So we have a lot of stakeholders, so to say, that we try to tell stories to.
That's amazing. Yeah, I think that's so important to connect people to their food. I think there's so much disconnection now, and technology can help connect you or it can help disconnect you. It's almost like it's a tool, right? So it's how the tool is being used, and I think having more people know how the food is grown, where it's coming from, I think is just so impactful. And then that experience, I think, is really important. Not just showing how it's grown, but actually tasting the food, I think is so important. I came to a point in my business where I used to cold call restaurants and I just got to a point where it's like emails, cold calls, you're selling a physical product that gives an experience to someone. I just started going in and just dropping off samples and just like having a quick conversation with the owner, the chef. And that's when I really started to have like much stronger success with the farm is when I just went out and just gave the product. Cause like my goal was to create the best tasting microgreen product. So I put a lot of time and effort into R&D and all that stuff. But people couldn't taste that. And it's very hard. It's hard to explain that well. And obviously storytelling is a part of that. But actually having the experience of trying these products, especially ones that are uncommon. Like I would have loved to try that the little I can't remember what it was called. I would have loved to try that. So yeah, like even I would love to go to visit the facility in New York. I'll actually be in Boston in the spring, so maybe I can do a tour there. And film it if there's interest in that, and then just share more of what's available and what's possible with microgreens. I think is really valuable, and that's one thing I really appreciate about our initial conversation we had before we filmed the podcast a few weeks ago was how much focus you guys have on collaboration. I think there's this really unfortunate mindset in the vertical farming space that everyone wants to own the technology and everyone wants to keep it behind a closed curtain. And I really appreciate how you guys are so focused on collaboration. I think this is how we move forward as an industry, how we move forward as a society, is to do more collaboration instead of hiding things, like creating a technology and being like, okay, this technology is only available for me and no one else can have this technology. I think that collaboration is much more powerful for everyone involved. And I think there's so many benefits to that are beyond like comprehension that I can explain in a couple of minutes. But I'm really glad that you guys have that approach to business. It's I think much healthier and better for society.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we make beautiful products. I mean, there's nobody can be against eating more microgreens, therefore producing more microgreens. So there's still such a huge market and still so much awareness still to be created around not just microgreens, but just edible plants. We know so little about what we consume on a daily. We learn. We are not. Technology is available, information available. We learn new stuff every day. But I'm very confident that on the topic of food and edible plants, being vegetables, fruits, or whatever, we know less of it day by day. We are losing knowledge when it comes to what we can eat. Because we used to have this wide spectrum. We used to be able to survive in nature and just harvest gathering, figuring out what we can eat. And we're losing more and more knowledge now. And I'm not talking about kids don't know where their food comes from. It's us adults that know less about food. There's so much variety, but we just choose to consume whatever is widely available. Yeah. That's why we only have a few varieties of lettuce that we know. And we have the illusion of choice that we think, I can have 5 varieties of lettuce to consume. Meanwhile, there's so much plants that are still out there that we never tried or forgot about. So again, the mission, let's change the way we look at food, is really about bringing that knowledge back to everybody, and to appreciate that type of food more.
For sure. Yeah. I love fruit. Fruit is like my go-to kind of thing. And there's this YouTuber that was on the hunt to try every single piece of fruit available, or every variety of fruit in the world. And at first he thought there was like 10,000 varieties or something. Like, this is not just commercial, like what can be grown and eaten. And he traveled like many countries and got to 1,000. So he tried 1,000 different fruits. It took a decade for him to try 1,000 different fruits. And then he found out that there's actually not 10,000. There's about and we don't know actually, right? Because there's so many things being discovered in the jungles and things that, because to know if something's edible, someone's got to try it and then hopefully not get sick, right? So there's still a lot of plants that people, haven't discovered yet, or the same thing with bacteria and insects. Like, there's always new discoveries of new fruits, new plants. And you're right about the commercialization kind of making a step backwards in that sense, because while we have so much abundance, we have abundance in very limited varieties, because that's what is grown commercially, right? Like, an average person can't go buy a variety of tomato that they've never seen before, so it's got to be available for people. Otherwise, either that or they're going to grow it themselves and go through the process.
That's what I love with the target audience that we have as Koppert Cress, because these are chefs traditionally in the high-end gastronomy. Now we serve all types of kitchens, but they have the opportunity to shape the way we eat in the future.
Mm.
So there's varieties that were unique, like rocket salad. I think you and I are both too young to experience that, but the first rocket salad that was served by restaurants. And this was a unique innovation. Now rocket salad you can buy by the kilo,
Yeah.
for at a discount if you want. So there's certain life cycles that plants go to, and I think that we're kind of stagnant for the last 20 years of product innovation when it comes to bring it to consumer. Or to talk about Europe, I was very proud to see microgreen salads in Whole Foods at Toronto. That was for me. We don't have that yet. Still in well, it slowly is getting there, but not on a big scale. So those type of really innovations from products are important, but the big R&D projects or the budgets, they go to products that you can actually own, and you cannot own rocket salad. You cannot own radish. It's something that's from all of us. So how can you create traction behind it to bring it out? And that's, again, the collaboration. Everybody who's growing microgreens is a partner in making sure that people are more aware of these plants.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's one a common misconception I get a lot, which is like, if there's more microgreen growers, then there's more competition between people trying to sell the market. But people don't realize that by having more growers creates a bigger market, and that's one thing that is you don't realize until you kind of see it happen. And I've obviously, I'm sure you've seen it happen. I've seen it happen over the last decade and or so. How much bigger the market is because there's more growers growing it, selling it, marketing their own product is why the market has changed. So oftentimes, a lot of people think demand comes first, but sometimes supply comes first. Like, you think about the iPhone, they had to create it to have the demand for it. You can't have the demand for something that people don't know about. So often supply will come first. So the more microgreens that are out there, the more demand will follow that, because more people will see these are really healthy. They taste amazing, and you can grow them locally instead of having to ship them halfway across the continent, which is what most salad greens are grown in the Northeast in Canada and the US. It all comes from California, Arizona. So that's a long distance away to have salad greens shipped when they can be grown locally in a vertical farm, or microgreens grown in people's homes or in a commercial facility.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah. So to wrap up here, I'd love to hear, I asked this question to everyone, and I'd love to hear if you can.
I would have worked more with real data, because it's always tricky we do things every year has a certain flow, and we know, this Christmas demand is higher, so we need to sow a little bit more. And what we've learned recently, and we're still taking the growing curves of certain products from 5 years ago, that keeping track of your data, and there's data in everything, in your sales numbers, in your growing cycles, and all those things, that will definitely help you to be better organized when you scale up. Are you growing 50 grams on a table or 60 grams? Or should it actually be 53 and a half compared to what the yield will be after 10 and 1/3 of a day? There's so much to gain from that. And it makes you be better in control. So of course, on our scale, we do it bigger, but we look at what food service as an industry is doing, for example, and we're able to use that information also in our planning and when we look ahead at the future, because the market is growing, meaning that everybody who is growing will grow more the coming years. I don't think there's a lot of microgreen growers who are in decline, and if you want to stay ahead of your growth instead of reacting to it, look at the market, look at the sales numbers you're doing today, because I think there's a lot of information in that which would help us. And I started only with that like 3-4 years ago. And that's when I say I started with that, means that I have very good people that help me with that. But the insights are tremendous, useful, very useful for us. So going back in time, that will be one of the things.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's so
and
there's
enjoy
so
the
much.
ride. I mean, that's also important. I mean, that's when we started, we had no clue what this. The goal was never to have 10 hectares or have so many colleagues. So that was never the goal. But it kind of happened. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm kind of the same way where, I just wanted to grow food and feed people. And then, your passion turns into something and people catch on to what you're doing, sort of thing. And then it just grows naturally. I think it's nice to have goals in some sense. But I think if I were to go back and think, if I set a plan to have my farm be X size, I don't know if that would have really helped the situation. Maybe it would have helped me plan to be like, okay, these are the things I need to consider if I'm going to get there. I think it'd help in that sense, but I don't think it would have really motivated me, because I wasn't motivated by size. I was motivated by more impact. And it seems like you guys are the same way, which is amazing. So this has been great. And also to touch on the data point that you said, I wish I kept more data early on, and especially now with all the software with AI, it's going to be really easy if you have good data to put it into like a AI system, and it'll just give you whatever information you want. That's going to be very soon going to be the reality. So having that data now sets you up for success, and those of people that keep the data points, whether it's growing or sales, whatnot, will be at an advantage over those that don't.
And it's important to do it in the right order. So knowing the growing cycle and then using the data. Because if you start with data without knowing how to grow, not know how that process works, or how commercially the contact with chefs is working, there's no value in it.
That's a good point.
So it starts with the experience, but if you have the experience and you want to expand, then there's so much to learn from data.
Yeah, that's a great point for sure. Awesome. So to wrap up, if listeners want to connect with you or Koppert Cress, what would be the best way for them to find yourself or the company?
So they can reach out to me, Stijn at koppertcress.com. I'm not very active on Instagram, but I do have an account which I follow a lot of microgreen growers. So it would be nice to get a shout out on Instagram, which is just Stijn Baan. Or LinkedIn works as well. I mean, we're open for all different ways. Yeah.
Awesome. This has been great. I learned some very interesting facts, and it was great to hear more about what you guys are doing. I think it's awesome what you guys have built and what's continuing to be built. And I'm excited to see more and more Koppert Cress in the world. And hopefully we can make a tour work of the facility in New York. And I think that'd be great to show. But
people. I would love to have you here in Holland as well, because what you can see here is it's quite unique, because there's a few topics where we haven't really touched yet. There's so much to talk about, but we're growing stuff underneath the water. We use the heat from the ground to heat our greenhouses. We're growing stuff only in the dark now, so there's still so much to. I keep those all as a teaser, But there's so much more of innovation that the future will see soon enough.
For sure. Awesome. Yeah.
Maybe, person.
Yeah, maybe we can have you on for another episode and kind of delve into the more deeper into the innovations and some of the new things you guys are working on. For sure, that would be awesome. Yeah, awesome. All right, so this has been great. Thanks so much for coming on, and thanks so much.
Thank you. More than welcome, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for tuning in to the Microgreens Mastery Podcast. To access a wealth of insights, just click the subscribe button, stay notified about each new episode, and enjoy all of this wisdom for free. If you're ready to supercharge your microgreens business, visit microgreensconsulting.com for a gold mine of guides and resources. We've transformed thousands of microgreens businesses, and you're invited to join the success story. Let's stay connected. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at Microgreens Consulting for exclusive content and expert tips and wisdom. If you found this episode insightful, please leave us a review, spread the word, and let's share microgreens magic with the world. Until next time, let curiosity fuel your growth, and may happiness be your harvest. Happy growing, everyone.